Welcome, Dimple. Thank you for taking time to spend a little bit of time with me to have a fireside chat, as I call it. Um, I always respect people's time, so taking a bit of time out from, I'm sure, a busy day is much appreciated. So, could you just tell us a little bit about your business and who you are? How did it all start?
Sure. Thanks, Asari. Thank you for having me, on Fireside Chat. My name's Dimple. I'm the CEO, founder, whatever you want to call me, for Purple Beard. Purple Beard is a company that's focused on skills, and we support individuals. Really, we work with a lot of women, those from disadvantaged communities, neurodiverse individuals, adults mainly, to get them into tech roles, but we do that via funded programs that we work with employers and to make sure that technology is represented by sort of the communities we live in.
No, excellent, excellent. And what was your path to? How did you become the founder and CEO of a company like this?
So I've always been a bit of a serial entrepreneur. So I set up my first business when I was 18. I was a university dropout because I have ADHD. University wasn't for me. It just didn't work for me very well. So I started working for my dad, and then I set up my own business when I was about 19, so to speak.
Wow,
And that was my first successful exit 4 years later. 5 years later, I sold it. Um,
that's
and
impressive.
it was always fun for me. Business was always, it was something to create. Of course, very hard as well, but I think I mostly look at myself as a good startup founder because I'm really good at getting my hands dirty, and I also can be a bit controlling. So I'm a good startup founder. With scale, I'm still struggling. I have my problems, but I'll talk to you about the audience and to you about that when we talk about some of the challenges.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Yeah, because
Yeah.
it's interesting. I have had clients who, as you said, very good at very entrepreneurial, find ways of making money, and then after a couple of years, start thinking, "Oh, I want to do something else." So it'd be interesting to explore that with you. Is there such a thing as a typical client of yours?
Well, we work with individuals, anybody who's 16 plus who wants to get onto our programs, but mainly we work with small businesses and large businesses who are looking to kind of employ people, in a cost-effective way, but also, sort of build a future talent pipeline, as I like to call it.
Hmm.
Yes.
And do
So,
you still see that
sorry.
as lucrative? The whole apprentice route, is
It,
that still working well?
Well, it sort of swings in roundabouts because it's linked very much to government policy and also to, if organizations are growing their headcount, but also apprenticeships can be used to reskill and upskill existing employees. So, with all of the technological change, an apprenticeship is a really good way of retraining or reskilling your existing employees. So you don't lose some of that intellectual capital, the goodwill that you built with your colleague in the business.
So if a you've already employed a member of staff on full-time pay or
Yeah.
full
Yeah.
pay,
Yes.
you
Yes.
can still benefit from apprenticeship training.
Correct.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, that's interesting to know. And it's subsidized as well, isn't it? As far as I
It's
understand it.
The training is fully funded
Oh, fully funded,
for
even better.
for
Yeah.
yeah, for an SME. And the reason some would say there's a 5% co-funding and a 95% funding. But what we do is we work with large employers who want to gift their levy. So they gift their levy to small employers. And through the levy gifting route, it could be fully funded. But let's say if there was no levy gift, it would cost the business 5%, which is no more than £800 in total.
Brilliant. Yeah. Yeah, that is good. Excellent. Yeah. And would you say, because it's an interesting thing, Dimple, because when I meet business people or people who want to start a business and they say, "Oh, I'm not sure if I've got a USP," I say to them, "Well, you don't need to have one necessarily, as long as you can provide something that people need with enough numbers to make money. The fact somebody else is doing it doesn't necessarily mean most businesses are copies of other businesses. So, what would you say about that? Would you say you're different from the competition, or because there's it seemed to be a bit of a niche in terms of the fact that you're, people with neurodiversity and things like that is a bit different.
So I think that we would say is a bit of a niche, because one of the program areas we work in is something called digital accessibility. So it's to make sure that digital, websites, documents, podcasts, videos are all accessible. And by accessibility, I mean is somebody who's got a sight impairment, hearing impairment, but also a temporary disability. They should be able to access digital solutions just like anybody who doesn't have an impairment. So I think that's where the passion kind of rises from. And hence we do focus on working with individuals who may have a neurodiversity, who may have a disability, because that's one of the key programs that we offer. And we always trying to raise awareness with communities and businesses about the importance of accessibility.
No, brilliant. Yeah, one of my most successful clients has ADHD, and he didn't find out till a lot later, later in life. But has done very, very well. But had a bit of a tough time in school. So was that something that you said you dropped out of school, and that did it impact on you, or did you know you had ADHD?
No, I was a late diagnosis. I didn't drop out of school. I dropped out of university.
University, sorry, yeah.
Yes, but I struggled in school. So I was called the disruptive child because I always would get bored. I always wanted to do the next best thing, or so it took a bit of, I was in boarding school, so it took a lot of discipline for me to kind of learn, if that makes sense. And I did find ways and means of coping and learning, really.
And did anything change when you found out? Or you'd already, by then you were successful, but I'm assuming by then anyway.
Yeah, it was a very late diagnosis, so it was just a few years ago.
Interesting. So it's not really had any impact on you, not in a negative way anyway. It doesn't seem to.
Not at all. I mean, I think in some ways it's been a superpower because I'm able to, when you have that hyperactivity, you also kind of move at, I always say that sometimes my brain is like I have 1,000 tabs open, but you're able to kind of multitask. And of course, sometimes it does get exhausting as well. And the other side of the coin is that you get burnt out. But I think as long as you understand.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, no, brilliant, yeah. Have you, in the years, because you've been obviously working for some time and doing this kind of role, is there any mistakes that you think, if you went back now, you'd do things differently? Is there anybody who hasn't made any mistakes in
I
business?
make mistakes every day. You make mistakes every day. If you didn't make mistakes, then you wouldn't be doing anything really. But I think there are some mistakes I've made, which, when I reflect back, and I think this kind of comes down to, for example, I suffered from burnout a few years ago, and hence, but I didn't recognize the signs. So I think now I'm very conscious that
More aware of it, yeah.
very aware of it. And, at that point, I just felt I just had to work 18 hours a day or, whatever it is, yeah, that we do, but not taking sufficient breaks, all of those things. And, I think sometimes you just have to step away or step out of things to kind of then see things more clearly. Also, so, I've made mistakes, and like I'm saying, I made quite a few mistakes. And I think the other mistakes also that I made in terms of growing very quickly. So, and when I say that, I think you sometimes you sort of, before you walk, you're running the marathon, right? And if you do that, you're bound to get a muscle pull. So I think sometimes with the business as well, there is that. So it's just kind of to be mindful of it and not to be afraid of growth, but I think to kind of be a bit more cautious.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a common message I get from some people. They like growth, but sometimes too fast can be quite challenging.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it creates lots of different challenges.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yes.
And would you have such a thing as a routine? I meet CEOs, usually male, but who and younger, who say, right, I get up at 5 o'clock, I go to the gym, I meditate, I do yoga. They have that kind of thing. And then there's other people who's much more relaxed about what their day might look like. Where would you see yourself in that? Do you have a daily routine?
I do have a bit of a routine, and I have like a morning routine that, so I kind of meditate and I journal in the morning. So I do something called morning pages.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, so I quite like that. And some days I miss it, but I don't beat myself up with a stick. But I also aim to leave the office at about 5:30 because I've got two dogs who I need to feed. So that's something, I need to leave at a certain time. I go back home and I log on later on. But yeah, I do have a bit of a routine, yes.
Interesting. Yeah, brilliant. Yeah. How would you say your working week? Do you manage that much better now about, not working too many hours and stuff?
I do. So I think it ebbs and flows. So I've gotten a lot better at managing my time and prioritizing. I think as you make mistakes, you also learn from your mistakes. Um, and you kind of look at, where should you be focusing your time and energy on? And then some days, of course, I'm all over the place, but most days I'm getting better at it. So, my calendar is a bit more structured with what I do, how I do. Also working with my own energy levels, so being very aware of that.
Yeah.
So I think it's that. And then one day, you know, I normally try and one day, so on a weekend, Saturday or Sunday, one day is a non-working day where I also kind of don't look at my emails, LinkedIn, nothing. So that's one day
Nice.
where I don't look at anything. I just
Anything? Yeah.
24 hours is mine.
Fair enough. Good. Good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you think of success, people have obviously different definitions of success. How do you seek success, and what sort of people do you admire? Is there any particular role models or people you admire?
I think success means different things to different people, like you said. You know, um, I think, for me, I think success is sort of growing this business, growing my team, and perhaps an exit at some point in the future. Um, if people, there are people I admire, of course. There are lots of people sort of in the business community who you sort of look towards. I think, Richard Branson, I like him. I like some of his philosophy. I also like Simon Sinek, but from a perspective of somebody who's I also like Brenda Brown. She's an author, so I quite like her as well. Um, from personal perspective, I think I have a lot of respect for some of my friends who are business owners and who've done very, very well, incredibly well. And I think you kind of look to them and you sort of learn from them on what
Hmm.
they've done, to create a successful venture.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant.
Yeah.
So, what about in terms of the future? So, you've been involved in the business for some time. You had a previous business as well, so you've multiple businesses. Where do you see yourself 5 years from now?
I think 5 years, again, I think in the skills world, 5 years is a very long time, but probably it should be going. So either if it's not under my leadership, under somebody else's leadership, because I've done a lot of work to get it to where it is at the
Yeah, yeah,
moment. It's not where it needs to be, but it's on its way there. So there's a plan, there's a very clear strategic plan for the next 3 years, in terms of revenue, in terms of the number of apprentices, all of those things, just having a very clear plan. But then again, you break that down on an annual basis, really. So, I have a 12-year plan, 12-month plan in terms of, what revenue should look like, what should the business look like, where should we be in terms of market positioning, all of those things. But, I think in 5 years' time, I would like to exit the business.
yeah.
Yeah,
Is that retirement or move on?
move on. I don't retire, move on.
And what, set another one up?
Maybe, yes, maybe.
Move back to Kenya?
I don't know. I don't know. I go to Kenya every year, but it's a bit hard moving to Kenya. There's lots of challenges there, as you can imagine. But I think move maybe somewhere warmer where I can work and, um, you know, sort of, also enjoy great weather.
It's easier now, isn't it? I mean, post COVID, everything's changed. I mean, before COVID, I was thinking, right, okay, so if I move to we spoke to somewhere like Rwanda or East Africa, it's only 1 hour difference.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking, still thinking in the physical world. And I was thinking, how am I going to make this transition? How's this going to work? It's a long journey. Da, 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 da. And then COVID came and it's like, it wouldn't make hardly any difference
No.
because most of the work I do now is online anyway. So that most of my clients wouldn't know whether I was in Outer Mongolia or in London. It makes very little
Yeah.
difference,
Yeah.
especially if the time difference isn't much because it doesn't affect your sleep or it doesn't affect too much your working
No.
pattern. So
No.
it's
No.
actually parts of East Africa are actually, actually very easy to make that transition. So yeah, things have changed so much. It's much
Yeah.
easier now.
Agreed. Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah,
Agreed. So I think it is, I work from Kenya every year for 6 weeks, and it's very easy to work from there.
yeah, yeah. So you
Yeah.
can spend a good time as well. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I
Without
spend,
affecting your business. Yeah,
so I spend 4 to 6 weeks there because I want to spend time with my parents. So, I end up working from there.
brilliant. Yeah,
Yeah,
brilliant.
yeah, yeah,
So one of the challenges with business owners is whilst we say it's easier now and staff are getting more and more comfortable working remotely and so on, one of the big challenges right now is how do you build a good team? I mean, that's always been a challenge, but you could almost have an additional challenge because at least before COVID, you would see staff every day in most traditional businesses. Now, you may see your staff once a week, maybe not even once a week. You don't see them all the time. You're not in front of them. So how do you know they're productive? How do you support them? How do you find that challenge today? And it might be an issue even with your apprentices, I assume, as well, what they want.
yeah. I mean, I think it's a really it's a difficult one, but I think one of the things I've recognized is it took a lot for me to get to where my team is now, but it took attrition, because I think sometimes there is control issues, especially when you're founder of a business and
Yeah,
you don't want to give up control, right? And you bring in people and you're not prepared to give them control and you're not prepared to let them do what they're good at. um so I think we've grown in a very interesting way. We grew and then we shrunk, and now we're at a size which is it's stable, if that makes sense.
hmm,
But a lot of my team, have stayed on because I think there's trust, but also, I offer them lots of opportunities around training skills. But I think it's about giving your team clarity. And I know it takes people management is very, very time consuming.
yeah,
But I think working with the team, they've got to have clarity on what the expectations are. There's got to be clear understanding of expectations from both sides, but also kind of having mechanisms to support with some of them. And I know with micro businesses, it becomes very difficult for something like that. But when you kind of get to 4 or 5, it's really important to put in that framework. This is what the business is, this is what our values are, this is what the vision is. Once a week we all must get together, have a huddle, talk about things, talk about where we're going, what our priorities are, what our objectives are. But how
yeah,
do they feed into the quarterly and annual objectives? And I think when I was one-man band, I didn't believe in any of this, trust me. But I think I learned that it's the only way where I can then free up time. Because if I don't teach my colleagues, or when I want things done a certain way, because we also deal with a lot of compliance, but if I don't give that autonomy to my colleague and say run with it, I'll always be stuck in it. So
100%.
it's having that trust, but um working with the individual and giving them that trust, and then checking up and supporting them. I think there is no easy way, unfortunately.
Mm.
I wish there was a magic pill we could all take and say,
No, there's this principles, as you said,
yeah,
checking in
yeah,
and giving them support, but clarification of role is massive.
yes,
Um, Staff who, you know, most complaints I get about staff is about attitude. But beyond that, one of the problems I identify is that if they're not trained, business owners can get very frustrated with them. But when you say to them, did you train them? Did you give them induction? And they say no. Have they got a job description? How much clarity do they have? Then there's no surprise that they're drowning in no, they don't know what they're supposed to do. So they're just making it up. So then when it's not what you want, it's maybe you didn't tell them what you wanted, or you told them the
Yeah.
first day, and that was, you sort of left them on their own. You give them a mobile and give them a mobile business card and say, get on with it. But people need a lot more clarity, as you said, and communication's a funny thing. You can tell people something, they say yes, I understand, and go off and do something not quite what you thought.
Correct.
So
And
you
there's
have
got
to
to be,
keep on checking.
yeah, and not just that, they've got to be KPIs, right? So that,
Needs to be numbers. Yeah.
yeah, there's got to be numbers. So, I mean, every Monday when I look at my marketing dashboard, my marketing guy, they need to deliver. They need to give me those numbers. But, we've set annual numbers, and then we've set weekly and monthly numbers. Now, if there's a problem with those numbers, then there needs to be a clear rationale what's not working, what is working. Because if I now start getting involved with marketing and everything else and this and that, then when am I going to do my actual job?
100%. Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's great that you said KPIs, because I always ask business owners to think about KPIs and start introducing them if they haven't already got them. And it usually makes a massive difference once you start focusing on objective stuff. Not I think my staff are okay, or I think they're not okay, or I think this and I think that. It's all an opinion. But when I say, well, do you have any data to really know or measure what on earth they're doing? You can have a perception that one member of staff's doing really well and another's not. But it could be based on just personalities and stuff like that. One person talks a lot and has got all the talk of the, gift of the gab, doesn't necessarily mean they're effective. They're just good at of making you think they're effective. And the person who's really quiet could be getting on with it. So you need to have, as you said, some kind of way of measuring where they are, and also they need to know, what
Yeah.
what is expected. How many calls do I need to make, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things also to think about is, and this is something I can only share from my own personal experience, is when a few years ago, when KPIs were brought in, I kind of froze because I was like, what should they be for my business? Yeah.
Mm.
And you've got to almost think about how many leads do I want. So from a sales perspective, how many leads do I want? How many customers do I want? How many followers do I want? This is from a very, sales and marketing is very easy because it's very tangible, right? But when you come to other things like, for example, we look at things like student retention, student engagement, student feedback for the delivery team. Yeah, so I think those become really important to kind of look at, and it's not that KPIs for my business would work for your business. So it's got to be quite specific, depending on what does it feed into. So if it's your revenue, if your revenue is going to be 1 million, how are you going to get to that 1 million? How do you break it? How many customers do you need? And is it revenue? Is it profit? What is it? Yeah. So I think those are really key metrics that as business owners, we should and have to understand. And, sometimes it's growing pains, huh?
Yeah. It's funny. I watch Asia and I see how Asia has managed to make numbers, but particularly Oriental Asia, if you want to call it that, place like Singapore and China and that and South Korea, they've made numbers something not to be frightened of. They've got a reputation. India as well got a reputation for being very good with numbers, which then feeds into tech and engineering and a whole range of areas. Somehow in the UK, we seem to have the fear of numbers at a very young age. And people make a decision, unfortunately, children make a decision at a very young age. Oh, I'm not good at numbers. And they kind of just, that's it. I'm not good at numbers. And they just give up. And then when they have a business, their first thing they say to me is, oh, I'm not very good at numbers. And actually, they're a lot better than they probably think. Because I say to them, don't you manage your own family budget or your own, personal bank account? And of course they do. And I say, well, that's a business is a version of that. Basically, it's just that we need to we need to just think about what you want to know and find out how we're going to get the numbers. And it's not as complicated as they might think it is. You don't need to be like an accountant level to really
No,
understand the basics, you know.
no,
But there is a bit of
agreed.
a fear, I find, a bit of a fear
No,
about
agreed.
numbers. So
Agreed.
just avoid it, you know. Oh, did you go through your accounts with your accountant? And usually if I ask for a copy, it's still brand new, you know, it's sitting on a shelf. It's never been opened
No.
because they
So
feel that I don't understand what they're reading.
no. And then, really just, I think if you did cigarette packet accounts is, what's your incoming, what's your outgoing, right? And what is remaining. Really, that's what it's about. If you're a small shop, I mean, just
Absolutely.
a
Cash,
small business, it's cash flow.
yeah,
And,
cash flow.
yeah, so, and you've got to have your finger on the pulse. And, I think that's one of the things I learned when we grew. I lost a bit of control on my cash flow. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that's really, really key to your business. Till you get to a size where you're 30, 40, 50, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, 100%.
Yeah.
It's surprisingly underestimated in so many businesses. Yeah. It's almost like as long as money's coming in, I'm happy. But are you sure what's happening when? And then suddenly there's a slight delay on a payment or something slightly delays, and suddenly I haven't got money for payroll or something, and it's like,
Mm.
well, everything falls apart, you know. So yeah, there definitely needs to keep an eye on it, unless you're very cash rich, you know, like a
Yeah. Yeah.
supermarket or something where they're
Yeah.
very cash rich. Everything's cash, cash, cash. That's great, but for most businesses, it's not immediate. You know, even
No.
like I know with your business, you do your placements and so on, and then there's that claim process. So you know, during that, you've got to know that cycle of when is it coming in, what's
Yeah.
due, when is it due. So you've got that cycle of cash flow. It's not like somebody just walks in and gives you money. So you've got to have constantly be on it
Yeah.
to know
Yeah.
when that money's coming in, isn't
Yeah.
it? So yeah, 100%. You we talked about AI when we had a brief chat, and obviously you recruit tech. How is that affecting you and your business at the moment, AI?
So I think, I think you've got to think about AI as we can think about it in two ways. It really depends where we sit on sort of the adoption curve. Uh, you know, but AI can be a facilitator and it can enable us to make some productivity gains, especially in small business. But you still need the human skills because remember, you still need somebody to review and fact check and make sure that it follows what your business is
Hmm.
trying to achieve, right? So you can use you can use generative AI because remember there's generative AI tools that you can use to create marketing content, to do research. You can it can support you write emails, write marketing copy, all sorts of things, create images, create posts, all sorts of things. But it's still got to align, right, with what your business is doing, what your values are. Because people are still doing business with people, right?
100%. And we've
Yeah.
seen some errors that are costly. I mean, do you remember the what was it? I forgot her name now, Kate, the royal family.
Yes.
When
Yes.
Kate was in hospital for a while,
Mm.
released a picture, and people started looking at this picture saying, "Hang on a minute, this picture doesn't quite look right." And then they started checking it a bit more and said, "This is definitely AI because the hands or something wasn't quite
Yes.
matching or something wasn't quite
Yes.
right."
Yes.
And then it made people doubt whether, well, is this real? Is this person trying to trick us or what's going on here?
Mm.
So as you said, you got to be a little bit careful if you just produce something, say it's a
Yeah.
picture, and then people start saying, hang on, the person's got 6 fingers or there's a hand missing or something's not quite right. You haven't picked it up because AI will bring things together and can create errors, isn't it? But phenomenal for data. I mean, lots of companies are telling me how it's making data processing
Yes.
much quicker, and
Yes.
they're able to give clients better information. So I'm assuming that's part of the apprenticeship models now to think about people who can help you with this
Yeah.
is part of your business now, is it?
Correct. So I think, when we include AI skills as part of all of our programs, all of our apprenticeships that we offer, because that's what we do. So, all of our apprentices will learn some fundamentals of AI, especially Gen AI and prompt engineering. Um, because those are the kind of skills they would need, but also thinking about ethics in AI and biases in AI, because there are lots of biases. And it's, how do we, how do LLMs work? Just that basic fundamental, what you call AI literacy.
Mm.
And then of course, if people are more interested, they can always go and learn more. But I think it becomes really key as part of any program that you run for businesses, for individuals. Yes.
I find it interesting. There's not many people recognize this. I mean, we used to have Google searches. Now we're moving away because that's a threatening area for Google, by the way, isn't it? That people are moving from Google searching to AI searching.
Correct.
And it's a big revenue stream for Google. So it's going to be interesting to see how that changes. But given that, as you said, people think Google's objective, like you're searching an objective, because it's a machine, they think it's an objective search. And as you said in AI, there's a danger that it's only searching what people have put out there,
Correct.
which is not necessarily objective
Everything.
at all. So if you say, well, who's beautiful? What does it tell me?
Yeah.
Who defines this?
Yeah.
So, as you said, it's interesting that you said it because you deal with neurodiversity and other things. It's quite interesting that you mention biases in AI. I don't hear many people talking about this. What do you see as the issue around that in AI?
I think, I mean, it's a much bigger piece, but I think again, when we come to, engineers and stuff who are creating AI, so there's obviously there's, what does it make up from a demographic perspective? Because we all have our own perceptions, and we're going to keep feeding that into it. So, for example, how is neurodiversity if you, uh, put in, a prompt about disability, what is it going to put out? Yeah. Because
Mm,
unless you have that lived experience, that shared experience, you're not able to really create that reality. So what is it based on?
mm,
So I think that's where the biases become a really big thing. And hence, even though if you are using generative AI as an individual or as, from skills perspective and from employment perspective, we've got to be able to dig down a little bit deeper, do a little bit of research and understand where is that data coming from, right? Rather than just using the first set of data that is thrown at you and really kind of digging down deep and saying, okay, where is this coming from? What is the validity of this? How relevant is it? Let me
mm.
go and do Google search and see what comes up and kind of be able to compare. So we still need those human skills, those, problem solving, critical thinking, that, where we're challenging and looking at it. You know, I think it'll be a while before AI can become that good, generative AI models. But
Yeah,
I think for now, we still need those human skills. They're really, really important.
yeah. No, it's great you mention it because I'm still getting stuff on WhatsApp from friends and people with videos and all sorts, and then
Mm.
we do a bit of fact checking and find out that these videos are not actually true. Whether it's because people are very concerned about tariffs, for example, and for
Yes.
example, and they say, "Oh, this government has done X or Y about it," and then when you check it, you think, actually, that hasn't happened. There's no announcement because there's very few things that happen with a government if it was that significant that doesn't get announced in the news somewhere. And when you see
Yeah.
no news announcement, you think, did that really happen? So
Mm.
yeah, so and it's so the videos are seem so believable
I
because you
know,
see
I
the
know.
person speaking and everything,
Yeah, yeah,
and you
yeah,
think, wow, that must have been an interview or a speech or something. But then
yeah.
you soon think, well, that would have been on the news if that was true.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, so you have to be very careful. In your industry at the moment, is there any particular challenges in your area, in your industry at the
Yeah, I mean,
moment?
I suppose there are always challenges. I mean, there are some, sort of funding rule changes coming in. So education is all ever evolving. And because we do run government funded programs, so, um, there's, changes sort of on the macroeconomic level sometimes. So we do have some changes coming into the education, post 16, but also like from a business perspective, where employers don't want to use programs like this to reskill or upskill their teams,
Mm,
or look at building a talent pipeline of junior team members, because we take away that headache, right? So
yeah,
if you think about it, it's sort of a risk-free way of working with a third-party organization like us, because we do the training, we do, we as long as we understand what your needs are, we can find you an apprentice. Yeah.
yeah,
So I think it's really that fear of businesses that, do we want to take on somebody who's so young or who's such junior? What is the impact of that going to be on the business? So there are all of those fears as well, especially within the SME sector.
mm,
Yes.
no, brilliant. Do you have any books that you particularly liked or recently read that you recommend?
Yeah. So, I mean, one of my favorite book is The Alchemist by Paulo
Ah,
Coelho. I really like it. I always kind of,
yeah, my
I've
wife loves that
always,
one.
yeah, so I do like that book. It's one of my all-time favorite. I've read it many, many times. Um, and I think from a business perspective, I really enjoyed Start with a Why, Simon Sinek,
Yeah,
uh, because it's really important to understand what your why is, because it's the only thing that's going to help you get out of bed every day.
yeah,
And when things are tough, you'll still keep going, because if you don't know what your why is, then you know it's going to be hard.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's a great book,
yeah,
certainly. Yeah. No, excellent. If you started all again, well, you've done it anyway, haven't you?
yeah,
You've started again. Did you do anything different the second time than the first time?
yeah. I did actually. I allowed. I think there were lots of learning. So historically, I never grew beyond two people, because of the fear. I overcame the fear of taking on more people, building a team and working with the team. It had lots of challenges, trust me. But I think, now if I had to do things over again, I would think about it very differently, because I would look at building a team right from the very beginning, even if it was just one or two other people to start with,
Mm-hmm.
and have a really sort of um a roadmap as to, and I know when people say, focusing on revenue, but you've got to focus on revenue in order to grow, right? If there's no revenue, there's no growth. So, what is the end result? But also, where I made some mistakes, where I was running two programs, where one, I kind of, the focus just slipped,
Mm-hmm.
and, you know, that caused issues. So I think it's about kind of saying, okay, what am I going to focus on, and how am I going to focus on? This is a short-term thing, but this is the longer-term program. So, how do you put in resources to support
Yeah.
both areas? Um, but also I think when you are starting projects, to look at your baseline costs and what your profitability is going to be on that project.
Yeah.
Because sometimes projects look really good on paper, but when you sit down to do the numbers and it comes down to numbers, you've actually made a huge loss.
Yeah. You really need to know where you're at, isn't it?
Yeah. So, I think, those are some of the things I do differently. But I think from a team perspective, I would start looking at building a team a lot earlier, a lot sooner. And I think, having made mistakes with team members, have had attrition, um, I think I kind of now also understand what sort of qualities I'd be looking at from somebody who was coming on board
Mm.
at such an early stage.
And you mentioned fear. What was your fear when it came to staff?
I think it wasn't so much about staff. I always felt I was a bit of a control freak. And often it was like, if you don't do it my way, I'm going to do it myself, kind of thing.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
was terrible. And I've learned that sometimes you just have to say, get on with it. If you need me, I'm here. But make your mistakes, and then maybe I can learn a few things from you. Actually, maybe that's something
yeah,
I don't know either,
yeah,
right? So and you have to give people sort of a timeline. You've got to say, again, it comes down to KPIs and deliverables. Don't be vague and ambiguous. Say to them, I want it in 5 days or 6 days or 7 days or 14 days, whatever works. And of course, if you have problems, check in or midpoint. How's it coming along? How's it getting on? I think if you'd have spoken to me about 6 years ago, 7 years ago, I would have had a very different attitude. I said, no, I don't want to employ anybody. I'm quite happy working on my own.
It's very common, actually.
Yeah.
Very common that business owners start businesses, and letting go can be quite a challenge.
Yes, but you have to let go, because if you don't let go, then what's going to happen is you're going to get caught up with the day to day, right? That and if you look at Pareto's principle, 80-20.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So 80% is going to lead to 20%. Actually, it should be 20% yielding to 80%.
Yeah, it's the wrong way around, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's sort of thinking about it, but also that's that really famous book, about the improvements. I keep forgetting. Sorry, my brain fog. But how you can make an improvement even by 0.5% every week, and by the end of the year, when you compound it, it's huge.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
There's the compound effect. The
Yeah.
one thing. There's a few of them. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
The
sorry
whole
about that.
marginal gains idea.
Yeah, the whole marginal gains idea. So I think it's to really kind of be clear about it. But I think also the other thing is that I know when we start a business, we start a business for many different reasons, right? We start a business because we are frustrated with the landscape. We are frustrated with working for somebody else. We want to solve a problem. We want to help other people. We want to make money. I mean, we want our own freedom. We want to work around our families. And if these are the priorities, then, but you hear most CEOs say, oh, I thought I'd set up my business so I could work around my family, but I'm spending 17 hours a day working. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm not spending time with my family.
No. It's a
Okay.
classic.
So, yeah. So, and this happens, I speak to so many entrepreneurs, in my community, and these are some of the same things we talk about.
Very
And
common.
it's to really think about what is the end in mind. You've got to have some form of end in mind, whatever it may be.
Yeah. And saying that, what would you leave in terms of some tips for business owners? You've mentioned some points there. What would you leave the listeners with in terms of some key things around business that they should think about?
I think focus on numbers, look at numbers, look at KPIs for your team. Make sure your team, your staff members have clarity. And, it's about putting that foundation in so they can support you. Because if you don't put the foundation in, then you're going to get frustrated with them and they're not going to be able to support you. So it's sort of, it defeats the purpose. But also ask for support when you need it. I think we don't really like to ask for help. We're very good at saying, no, I can do it. But I think be okay to ask for things. And also, I think one of the things that's really important for business owners is kind of build a community where you can kind of talk about things.
Yes. It's a great one, yeah.
Yeah, whether it's your friends, family, whatever it is. And one day you should try and switch off your mobile phone. And
Switch
completely.
it off.
One day you've got to switch off. Just one day. 6 days your business owns. One day you should just have for yourself, just to think, reflect, take a step back.
Yeah. Give your family a bit of time.
Yeah, whatever, if it's your family, your sport, your walking, whatever it is that gives you joy.
Bit of time out. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
fantastic. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And final question for you: if I had 100 million, if I gave you 100 million pounds to invest in business, what would you do with it?
Oh, I would change the education system. I would go and build lots of different schools completely.
Wow.
That's what I would do.
Tell us a little bit more. What would you change?
education is supposed to be a place that should support curiosity and play and an element of learning and growth and communication. So education shouldn't all just be about books, and education also needs to be led by community. Not, of course, we have the education frameworks and teachers and stuff like that, but I think communities need to be involved. So one of the things I always thought about is it's called the School of Life, where you have schools that are, that are sort of solar powered, wind powered, communities come together, communities volunteer in those schools. They teach not just skills, but also arts and crafts and play, really, where creativity is really key. And it's about that social cohesion, it's about community, it's about respect. And perhaps I'm an idealist in some of those ways, maybe I am, but I think if we change education, it changes the future of children, right? And that's how we need, it's got to be a sort of a ground up approach. It can't be a top down approach. It's got to be a bottom up approach. So where do we start? We have to start with, education really at its grassroots level, where, you're teaching children about the environment and about, ability, disability, about respect. I think that's where it becomes really powerful. And it's not just about reading a book and regurgitating it, but it's developing much wider skills, really.
Yeah.
So that's what I
like
would do.
No, brilliant. Well, where's the time gone? It just drifts by so quickly. I just want to say, Dimple, thank you very much for, as I said, taking out, gave me loads of nuggets, lots of ideas. There's a couple of those gem books as well. So just want to say thank you very much.
Thank you, Asari. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.